We're talking about the top 10 legal and business mistakes when it comes to hiring for your med spa. My name is Katlin Cauffman, CEO and founder of Diamond Accelerator, and I'm so excited to have Sara Shikhman, founder and CEO of Lengea Law. And we're going to be diving in, giving you all of our best tips, tricks, and secrets to help you not only find that great, perfect candidate to add to your team, but to make sure that it is really a win-win. Like it's gonna benefit your business is gonna be protected, and you're setting your new employee up for long-term success. So without further ado, Sara, let's dive in. Tell me a little bit about yourself, and then let's give them all the tips and tricks that we have working well over a decade in this industry.
Awesome. I'm super excited to be here. Thank you so much for the opportunity to share some of my knowledge and hopefully help some people with this really important topic. So I'm Sara. I started Lengea Law about 5 years ago with really a purpose to help healthcare entrepreneurs because I was a healthcare entrepreneur myself. I started a med spa, grew it to 12 locations in different states, and I've made every hiring mistake that we're going to talk about today, but I've also learned how to fix each of those mistakes. And now through representing over 1,400 med spa clients, I know a thing or two and hoping to share that today with the audience.
Awesome. Awesome. So, do you think that it's important to begin preparing the legal side of things before you start the recruitment process, or once you have that perfect candidate that you want to hire?
Great question. I think it's better to start before to figure out legally where they're going to fit into your organization and also how will their employment or their contract with you be structured? Are they going to be an employee? Are they going to be a contractor? And there's a big difference. Are they going to work full-time? Are they going to work part-time? Who's going to pay for their insurance? Who are they going to report to? All those things should be figured out even before you start hiring.
And are those like steadfast rules that are applicable to every single practice, or is it really based on like needs and strengths and where a practice is to determine what's going to be the best fit for them?
I think it's really practice specific. Someone's practice could be, really small and be hiring their first person and maybe could hire that person as a contractor with like a 90-day trial period, where some other practice could have 20 employees already and have a standard, and deviating from that standard could create problems. So yeah, I think it really depends on the med spa itself.
And let's say I find that great, again, perfect candidate, and I have a conversation about what type of employment I should be offering them. What kind of contracts or language is important to include instead of just saying, okay, great, come on board, you're a contractor or you're an employee. What do I need to protect myself?
Great question. So much, right? So first of all, depending on your state, different things in the contract may be enforceable or not. And in some states, certain things in the contract could be illegal. For example, in a state like California, if you put in certain non-compete provisions, that's actually illegal. You could actually be subject to fines. So you want to be sure that whatever you're putting in also is compliant for your state. But some of the must things for today's environment would be a social media policy. For example, can your new employee have their own social media, or who is it going to belong to, or what happens to it after they leave? Or are you going to provide training to this person, and how much training, and what happens if they leave? Happens if you provide them $20,000 of training and they leave in 6 months? Do you want some money back? What's going to be this person's schedule? Schedule becomes a huge contentious issue where, let's say you secretly, not secretly to yourself, but secretly to your employee, wanted them to work one Saturday a month. You just didn't mention it because you didn't think it was important. But then a month later, after they start, you say, hey, by the way, I'm adding Saturdays to your schedule. And they say, well, that's not in my contract. you'll be in a bit of a pickle because you didn't negotiate that ahead of time, and there's nothing that says they have to do it. So things like that definitely are really like legally important to have as must-haves. I mean, there's a whole checklist that we have for any kind of contract, employment, or a contractor, and making it also very clear, like, is this person an employee or a contractor? And specifying that in the contract with them, and not calling one the other. A lot of people have contractors and they say they're my 1099 employee. And I say, no, there is no such thing as a 1099 employee. They're either a 1099, which is a contractor, or an employee.
So I'm sure you get this question every day, right? Around non-competes, non-solicitation, adding finder's fees in the event they leave, you go out on their own and take your clients, they have to pay a finder's fee. What is your thoughts around that? Because I know that, there's been some things that's like, oh, that's going away and whatnot. And what do you advise people on what they should be doing right now around that?
It's an evolving topic. Right now, the non-compete ban, the rule where non-competes in all states were going to go away, has been struck down. So right now, non-competes in many states are allowed. That being said, every state, like state by state, is going after non-competes in some way. So for example, in Pennsylvania, just recently, there was a new rule that said non-competes for most healthcare professionals are no longer enforceable, with very, very few exceptions. So I think, first of all, check your state rules with your attorney. And second of all, if you're allowed to put in a non-compete, I would put one in. But make it reasonable because you want it to be enforceable. So if it's a 30-mile non-compete and you're in a city, that's not going to be enforceable. Even a 10-mile non-compete will not be enforceable. In a place like New York City, a 2-mile non-compete may be not enforceable. So really consider, like, what is the narrowest non-compete you can live with and put that in. So for a place like New York City, it could be 10 blocks and 6 months. And for, let's say you're in Ohio, maybe it's 20 miles or 10 miles and a year. But courts are not going to enforce a 3-year non-compete, no matter where you are, most of the time. And courts are also not going to enforce a non-compete that's so broad where the person really can't really work anywhere for, any period of time.
Make a living. Yeah. What's your thoughts on non-solicitation?
I
Is
think
it hard to enforce?
non-solicitation is very hard to enforce, and it's very hard to really figure out like what constitutes solicitation. Like, for example, if somebody puts something on their personal Instagram that says, tomorrow I'm starting a new job at blah, blah, blah place, is that solicitation? Does that violate somebody's contract? Like, are you not allowed to say where you're working now? So I think non-solicitation is a good one to include, but make sure to define specifically what solicitation. So if you are going to say that solicitation is when you DM old client that you didn't have a relationship with, who wasn't your personal friend, and you say, hey, by the way, great news, I'm starting in this new practice, maybe that is clearly solicitation. But a court is not going to enforce a non-solicitation clause that's also overly broad. So just be careful there. But I think, and you'll talk about this, during your presentation, but these clauses are there to deter people from bad behavior. But contractually, people are not indentured servants, and they will only be scared up to a point. So contractually, even if people are leaving your practice because of culture, because of some of the other things that Caitlin will talk about, I can give you an ironclad contract that's going to be like, this person is in jail, like they are going to be fined $1 million if they leave. They're still going to leave.
Mm-hmm.
So the business side of this is equally as important or even more important.
Yeah. Every day I talk to practice managers and business owners that they want, especially around injectors, right? They want to hire an injector, but they're so tired of investing all this hours of training and money in their training, and then they just leave them, right? And they want to know, like, do they protect themselves? How can they, you know, not lose out on tens of thousands of dollars in training and lost time and revenue by this revolving door of injectors?
I think the best way people can protect themselves are with these narrowly defined, but very specific contracts that talk about what happens if the person leaves and monetizing the damages. So basically saying, for if you leave in X number of months, you would owe us this, or if you solicit patients, you would owe us X per patient. And then also being very clear in the contracts of what you expect from the people. A lot of times I think people leave because there's a miscommunication about what the person was supposed to do or what they were going to have. For example, you hired someone full-time, but then, the business was not as busy and you reduced their schedule to 25 hours a week. Silently, they got very upset by this because they're not making what they thought they were going to be making. But if you had a different contract with them that said, listen, for the first 90 days, we're building this business together, no hours are guaranteed. If you set their expectations that way, they're much more likely to stay if you have a slowdown in that first period because that's what they expected.
Yeah, you're making such a good point in the sense of, yes, you can do all of these things contractually and legally, but you also have an obligation to set them up for success. And the very first thing that you can do is get very clear on roles, responsibilities, and expectations, right? Like a common one around injectors specifically that I see is that, 2, 3 months in, the practice manager or business owner comes to them and is like, well, why are you not recommending lasers or to our wellness side or skincare or selling skincare, right? And the injector's like, because I just do lips or I just inject. And was not a part of the job description. That was not, what we discussed in the interview process, right? And so you got to get very clear so people know what they're getting themselves into, right?
Yeah, definitely. And one thing to think about and to be a little bit forgiving of yourself, I always tell people a lot of times with your first hire, it is possible that it's not going to be your perfect hire. It's a learning process. So very often we find that when people are hiring their first hire for the first like new position, let's say they never hired a laser technician before and they're hiring their first one, that person has a much higher likelihood of not working out than if they're hiring their 10th one. That's just what happens. It's like, did you get married to your first boyfriend? Probably not. That's okay. You learned a lot from that relationship, probably, right? It's the same thing. So I think just forgive yourself a little bit that you may have done most things right, legally, business wise, but your first hire for a particular position may not be perfect.
Yeah, when you know better, you do better, right? So
Yeah.
now I'd like to unpack a few things that I think people learn as they go through a couple hires. Is it's not just about like, and I'm going to stick with the injector role because I feel like that's where people get it wrong the most or have the most challenge with, right? And meeting their specific needs. They spend all of their time worried about, can they inject beautiful lips? Do they understand full facial rebalancing? And they leave it just at that. And while that is wildly important, right, on the didactics of being able to really be a good injector, right, that's just a small piece of the puzzle, right? They oftentimes don't even talk about or unpack if it's going to be a cultural fit, right? Like, are they going to be of the same mindset as you? Are they going to the vision that you have casted for your business? Do they want and desire the same things? Do they share the same core values? Right? Are they looking for something that is, very loose and has a lot of autonomy and they can take off time whenever they want, right? Or do they want a much more structured environment? Are they growth minded or are they very set in their ways, right? We often find that people really don't spend any or little time making sure that it's a cultural fit.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a great point. There are many different types of practices, right? There are practices that do 2 hour, 1 hour and a half appointments, and it's very like luxury and personalized, and there are practices that want you to see, 15-minute Botox, 10-minute Botox, and you have this understanding that if 10 extra patients get added to your schedule, well, 10 is a lot. Let's say 3 extra patients get added to your schedule in a day, everything is fine. Whereas for some people that may be like totally unacceptable and way too many. So maybe during the interview process, you could ask something like, okay, it's Friday afternoon at 5 o'clock, someone calls and they want to get in today. Your day ends at 5. What would you do in this situation?
Yep.
And see what they say. Of course, like this is their interview. Maybe most people are going to say, well, absolutely. I would stay. But some people may say to you very honestly, like, look, my personal time is very important. I would see if maybe they could see me on Monday.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and even now let's look at the operational side of things, right? Like, are you asking them to wear many different hats? Like maybe you're a smaller practice and they have to fill many different roles, right? Or you're at a larger practice and you are used to filling many different roles, but now they just want you to fire the laser all day, or now they just want you to inject all day, right? So it's really important that you get really clear about operationally what those expectations are, right? Is the expectation that you show up 15 minutes before the shift starts so that you can be there for the start of day meeting, right? Even if that means like you got to figure out something with your kid in the morning for morning drop off at daycare, that is not a non-negotiable. Is it not a non-negotiable, right? If there is an event or a training that you are expected to attend. All of these things are often overlooked and not discussed or included prior to hiring.
Yeah, definitely. I think a lot of times people are hiring quickly and firing slowly. And maybe you could talk about that, right? How the right way is probably not that.
Yeah. In fact, I always tell people that you want an evergreen recruitment system so that you are never held hostage by an employee, right? That you're never caught with your pants down and you're like, oh my gosh, so and so just quit, or so and so is sick now, and or so and so is having a baby, and right now we can't serve our clients. So what happens is then we get desperate. And so we just put a warm body in the seat because we haven't been cultivating a pipeline of talent so that we have choices at the end of the day, right? I can't tell you how many people I talk to and they're just like, like my injector is the most miserable person that I work with, but like I can't get rid of her, right? Because of her book of business, or I have no one else. And it was like, you should never be held hostage by an employee, right? You're not doing your job as a business owner or a practice manager and and again, maybe it's not for any bad reason, right? But you should have at least 2 people in every key position in your business on the sideline, begging, wanting, ready to work for you, so that all you have to do is pick up the phone and you vetted them, right? You've taken your time, you've done test projects, you've done had them come in to shadow. You've actually spoken to their references, right? A lot of people ask and they might try, right? But then when they don't hear back, they're like, oh, okay, whatever, right? Are you actually checking the boards to see if there's any complaints,
Or
right?
if they're
Like,
actually licensed, or if
yeah.
they're actually licensed. I've had people who hire people and they say that they're a registered nurse and they're actually nursing school.
Yes, you have to do your due diligence, right? It's so costly. Talk about like what the ramifications potentially can be when you get this hire wrong, like from a legal standpoint.
Yeah, the wrong hires can be potentially very expensive and costs that you don't necessarily see as dollar bills coming out of the practice, but they are extreme. So your patients leaving, right, and following this person somewhere else, or just feeling like, oh my God, there's so much turnover here. I don't even know who's gonna do my injections this time, so I don't want to come to this place anymore. Um, and then the impact on morale for the rest of your team members, and then just the amount of institutional knowledge that's lost each time, right? If you have someone that you trained and you spent 50 hours training them or 500 hours training them and they left, those are hours that sort of walked out the door. Even if you don't have a training reimbursement contract with them, your time and the time you took to do this is valuable, right? So it's super disruptive, but also, people can file for unemployment, and that's one thing. People can file for harassment and discrimination and all kinds of things, real or unreal. That could be extremely expensive. So making the wrong hire and then getting sued by someone for something could be extremely costly and just super stressful and unpleasant. So it's important to get the right hire. But at the same time, also just keeping in mind that sometimes things just go wrong and you want to mitigate the damage as much as possible. Like you made the wrong hire, they're telling you they want to sue you, you disagree, you want to sue them. Maybe it's just practical to settle with them for $5,000 rather than having it escalate. I like to tell all my clients, like, let's just be practical, right? Like, there's no point in you spending 20,000 in legal fees to negotiate a settlement amount lower than $10,000. You might as well have just paid that to that person and moved on. So I'm always trying to tell people, like, consider the amount we're talking about. Is it worth fighting with legal fees over? Even if the person was wrong and you were right, sometimes it's better to just move on.
It's our egos. It's our egos, Sarah, that get in the way. We don't want them to win.
I get it. I get it. I see it, but I just, I've lived it. I just, it's hard. Sometimes our ego has to lose, but financially we win.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's transition over to the financial side of things. Because again, a lot of people have gotten this wrong, and so they feel like they've wasted labor money, training money, right? Marketing money, lost patients, gained patients. So what are the things legally you would want to do to protect yourself and or set yourself up for success on the financial side with a new hire?
Well, I think legally what you would want to do is make sure that you have a training reimbursement contract so that you have a training plan in that contract that outlines the time you're going to spend, because your time is valuable, and you would quantify that, the products you're going to use or approximately, and the period over which training will happen, and then specify how reimbursement will happen if the person is going to leave. Another way to do that, so some people may say, well, it's super hard to collect in this situation. And that's true. Like, let's say someone owes you 50,000 and they left, very hard to get that money from them, even if you're 100% right. So another way to do it would be to offer a retention bonus. So you would hire someone at a lower rate to start, but you would say, after you complete training and you stay with us for a year or 2 years, on your 1 year anniversary, you get a $20,000 bonus. And on your 2nd year anniversary, you get a $30,000 bonus or whatever. So then you owe them the money as opposed to them owing you the money. So if they leave, yes, you lost out and you trained them and they left, but they don't owe you 50,000 that they're not going to pay. This way you pay them a lesser amount as their salary while they were in the period of training.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that question comes up quite often is like, we can put those parameters in place, but what's the likelihood that we are going to actually collect on that?
It's low. I think it's slow. We've had clients who had great contracts where it's clear that they are owed the money and they're enforceable. Even the court says they're enforceable, but if the person doesn't want to pay you, you have to go and collect the judgment, freezing somebody's assets and putting a lien against their house and all that stuff takes a really long time, and you may not get the funds. They're going to say they're poor. They may file for bankruptcy. They may hide their money. So it's really hard to collect on that stuff. And then being in court takes time. So it's not like you said you have a super clear contract, you go to court, you get a judgment same day. No, it's like a 6-month process where there are delays and postponements and all that. So it's better in a way to have it structured as a retention bonus than something where they have to pay you.
Gotcha. Okay. And from my perspective on the financial side is people are not doing their due diligence and knowing their numbers and the market as well. So they're just like throwing out a number or throwing out a number of like, well, this is what I can afford, right? And then expecting to have this crazy great top talent, or even if they get that top talent, to actually retain them if they are not paying, a fair or generous wage. Good injectors that are loyal is like not the easiest thing to find, right? You can find a good injector, but they're not loyal, right? Or they're loyal and they suck. So, like, to find a good injector that is loyal, it has to be a win-win for the practice and for the injector. And I often see that they either are grossly underpaying or they're grossly overpaying, and both is not good.
Yeah, both are totally not sustainable. Yeah.
Yeah, and so you gotta first know your financials, and then you need to work with a company that understands what experience licensing is needed to meet your expectations, right? It's fine to say, oh, I'll pay someone this, but we need them to generate that, right? Well, that's going to require this type of experience, right? And they're just not really doing their due diligence to come up with a compensation plan that's going to be a win-win, and then they wonder why they leave and or can't even retain top talent in the first place.
Yeah, definitely. And top talent, I think, needs a plan where they know where they're going to and how they're going to grow in the role. So if you give them like a 3-year, 5-year plan, like right now you're going to be injector level 1, and second year you're going to be injector level 2, or you have much better names for this, I'm sure, but someone has a plan where they're going to grow, where of course their salary will grow, but also their title will grow and their experience will grow, and their responsibilities will grow. People like to see things like that. Otherwise, they feel like, okay, if I'm going to just stay in this role and be stagnant, I might as well open up my own place where I can do whatever I want, right? That's what people think. Like, I'm going to open up my own place. Right now, I'm just getting paid 20%. Well, now I'm going to get paid 40%. And of course, that's not correct, but financially, that's what some people think.
Yeah, absolutely. You have to cast a vision and show them a career advancement model or plan. Otherwise, you literally, it's only a matter of time before they are going to leave you, right? And your role and part of it is great. You can have that career advancement plan and show how you're going to invest in them, but you want to protect yourself legally, right? And try to prohibit and detour people as much as possible from that poor behavior, right? That everyone's trying to prevent.
Absolutely.
Awesome. I think that we have really shared a lot of nuggets and gold for aesthetic practice owners on, the strategies and what you should be looking out for and being what you should proactively be doing to set you and a new employee up for success.
Yes, I think we have. I think, it's a hard road. And it's good to have some experts to help you along the way, and forgive yourself if sometimes you may make a mistake. Just know that that's common, and the industry is changing so much that, these things are happening. So I think sometimes people contact us and they're in this like very emotional situation, and it's always important to give yourself a little bit of grace in that situation as well.
Yeah. And just as you mentioned, when your first hire compared to your 10th hire and what you learn along the way, right? And giving yourself grace between that. Or you could help fast track your success by speaking to professionals that do this every day. And that's why Sara and I are both very happy to provide complimentary consultations. Sara on the legal side, myself on the business and operations side, to set you and this new team member really up for success. So we're going to be including in the show notes links to schedule complimentary consultations to share with you a game plan and how to protect yourself and really set yourself up for success. Additionally, I would love to share with you guys our company onboarding checklist. This is, to me, there should be a company onboarding checklist and then an employee onboarding checklist. So this really is just the beginning, because you're going to be having the same conversations and submitting the same paperwork. And so you want to streamline this, right? Because some of the things I think that prevents people from firing sometimes when they should is because they don't want to have to start over again and have the same conversations and file the same paperwork. But that should never be holding you back from really building the team that's going to help you really achieve the vision and goals that you have for your business. So Sara, thanks so much for joining me today, and be sure to follow and check out Sara on Lengea Law. And also her book too. Sara, I loved your book. I read it many years ago. It's still so applicable to today. So if you are an aesthetic practice owner, that should absolutely be on your bookshelf.
Thank you. Yeah, my book is called MedSpa Confidential. You can get it on Amazon or Audible. And yeah, I'd love to know what you think.
Awesome. All right, guys. So be sure schedule your free consultation and access the free onboarding checklist. Thanks so much for joining us today and learning some of the top 10 legal and business mistakes from hiring in your med spa. Bye.